Today we have with us Professor Sanjoy Hazarika, the noted journalist and the founder of Northeast Studies Center and Policy Research in Jamia Millia, Islamia. Welcome to the show, Sanjay. And
thank you.
Recently you organized an international conference, Reimagining India's Northeast Network, Narratives and Negotiations. First of all, I would like to ask you, what was the basic idea of establishing a center focusing on Northeast studies? And later on, I would like to ask you about that conference.
Well, as far as the center is concerned, it struck me that in the whole academic space in India, people talk about the Northeast, governments make policies for the Northeast, but there's no center for research on the Northeast, in a central university. And it struck me as a major gap which needed to be filled. So I talked to the former Vice Chancellor of Jamia at that time, suggested it to him, and with a team, another young academic who has since unfortunately passed on, we started the idea and the program, the effort. So because the thing is that if policies are made, if attitudes are to be changed, if approaches are to be different, then you must have good, coherent research and data with which to inform people. Because with my background in writing, publishing, and journalism, I feel that it is very important that some of these things reach out to a larger audience and to through a larger media. So we have a lot of emphasis on publishing, dissemination, not just organizing research, because that research to be effective must go out beyond the classroom, beyond the seminar room.
Okay. I know you as a journalist, you were here as a correspondent of New York Times in Delhi, and you were having a keen interest in Northeast, you were writing some books, but what changed you to shift from journalism to academics?
Well, I think that in journalism, I still write columns, but I think, frankly, I got tired of chasing the daily story.
Okay.
And I thought it was important that people like me were better informed if we did more field research and linked that field research to a concept of how things should be, how they can be. All of us in our lives, we see things which are wrong, which we think are not right, not appropriate, and we want to make changes so that they become better, condition of people improves and so on. And I felt that, I needed to understand the Northeast far better. I had traveled very extensively, but I still didn't understand it. I had written about it, but still didn't understand it. And I think my understanding has improved, and we've been, at the center, been able to develop a small but very effective team that is able to bring that understanding to a broader audience of scholarship as well as a bigger audience.
I'm told that your center is working on each and every state of Northeast.
Well, we try and work on some of the states. We don't have the manpower to work on all of them, but one of the things that we try and do is develop partnerships with other departments, with other institutions, so that, rather than one person working on several things, if several people work together, they can reach many more, they can touch many more issues and research them and work on them.
Okay. Now let's talk about this international conference which you have organized recently. What was the purpose of this conference and how much you have achieved in that?
Well, the last part of the question first, how much we have achieved, I'm actually quite amazed at the kind of response we've had, at the quality of the sessions and the discussions. But what has not just impressed me, but has been for me, very illuminating, is to realize so many of the young scholars are rooted in their own issues. Like the issues that they are writing about, researching, traveling for, and coming to conferences like this, they actually have a link to some of those issues. Like we had presentations on the Chor, which is the island communities of Assam, of the Brahmaputra River. The person is from a particular Chor, an island. So he's able to understand these issues very better. I mean, so this is not just an academic conference with a whole lot of social theory, but it is also people who are looking at performing traditions. Like there was one scholar who's from Germany who's looking at how one particular Naga tribe has changed its approaches in the public sphere in terms of performance, their symbolism, their, what they regard as their important to them, even the way they eat, what they wear. And there were many things like this which are eye-openers and very good as standalone papers. What to me also was very important was the importance that so many scholars gave to cross-border connections.
Okay.
Not just the usual trade and all the stuff, but ethnic connections, language connections, histories which are shared, geographies which are shared, traditions which are shared, especially between the northeast extreme edge and Burma and even parts of China. So I think to me that was really revealing, and some of the studies do point to a very old relationship between parts of the northeast and parts of Southeast Asia, including Burma and Southwest China.
Okay. I was going through the concept note of your conference, and I got to know that this is the third conference in continuation, and two conferences held earlier in Europe somewhere?
Yeah, the first one was in Göttingen University in Germany. That was in 2011, which is mostly focused on ethnography. And a similar conference in Vienna, at the University of Vienna. But this is the first conference of its kind that we are having in India, because I thought that, everybody from the north, it's so expensive to take people from India to Europe.
Yes.
It is better to have a conference like this in India at our center. We'll have the space, and we have good collaboration and support with Jamia, the leadership of Jamia. So we're able to share space and bring it together in a more compact manner. So this is a much bigger conference than the other two. It's one of the biggest that's involved scholars from the Northeast. As an international conference, we've had nearly 100 people present. All of them did not present papers, but we had nearly 60 papers. And very different issues, but the themes were...
And there was a large participation from abroad also.
There was, people came from Europe and also from Myanmar. So that was to us a very good indicator of interest and their own scholarship, because some of them are working on issues of the Northeast, such as on elections in Meghalaya.
Yeah.
And somebody else is working on Naga issues, not political, but social issues, performing arts, and how people see themselves over a period of time. How the image, like for instance, we are talking on camera, but how did the still camera influence the perception of people in Mizoram at how they view themselves? People started seeing them as people who existed. You never could see yourself before in collaboration with other groups and so on. So that helps develop
So do you have
identity.
any plan to publish these papers? Or?
Yeah, we hope to have 3 sets of publications, 2 in journals and 1 edited volume in a book.
Now let's talk about the issues concerning northeastern states: migration, conflict, ethnicity, cross-border, and dilemma of identities, communities. In one of your paper, it says that there are more than 35 million people in 80 states and more than 350 communities there. So tell us something about that region, what are the real issues concerning people?
Well, the population of the Northeast is actually 4.2 crores. It's not 35 million. Assam's is about 32, 33 million, 3.2 crores. And I don't know if there are 350 ethnic groups, but we know that there are more than 220.
Okay.
And I think a lot of the issues relate to assertion of identities as related to land. There are contestations over land, there are contestations over identity and space. For instance, whether it's in the Bodo areas or the Naga approach to a larger Naga homeland, there are different groups which contest those claims. So the whole issue of homeland becomes very tricky. I'm sure you've talked to other people who have participated in the conference, and they would have told you similar or perhaps different things. For instance, one issue that comes up time and again in a place like Assam is this whole issue of a Bangladeshi. Now, what is a Bangladeshi? A Bangladeshi is a person who has come from Bangladesh. Whether he's come legally or illegally is a different thing. But it's post-71, because before that there was no Bangladesh. But in the larger public psyche, a Bangladeshi is anybody who's come over the last 50 or 60 years. Now, if you look at it now, it's nearly 44 years since the third partition of India took place and Bangladesh was created,
Sanjay,
So-
we have to take a short break here, but don't go away. We will talk to you soon. You are talking to noted journalist and Northeast specialist, Professor Sanjoy Hazarika. Welcome back. We are talking today Professor Sanjoy Hazarika. Sanjay, before the break, we were talking about the composition of northeastern states and its people, its fauna and flora, and other things there. So would you please elaborate now?
Well, I think the issues in each state are quite divergent and separate. And there are, since we are talking about ethnicities, there are more than 220 separate groups, ethnic groups in the region. So that makes it a very complex place, not just to understand, but also to administer, to find solutions from, because this one size fits all does not work. And I think that what has happened in the past decades is efforts, laudable efforts by governments to find solution to, for instance, to ethnic problems, or rather to insurgency problems, are seen as dealing with a law and order situation or a breakaway group, rather seeing the larger picture of what makes these things happen and what needs to be done in the long term to try and tackle them and resolve them. And it is the short-term approach, whether it's Delhi or the state governments, as well as the groups which are contesting the idea of India, that creates problems that seem almost impossible to solve. Because once a group comes into an accord, there'll be somebody else who will break away and say, no, you're not representative of me, I don't agree with you, we will fight against you also. So the important thing in all these processes is a greater inclusive approach that brings in civil society, that brings in an element of research and scholarship, and that enables these things to have a much surer footing. In parts of the Northeast, I would say that the state is conspicuous not by its presence, by its absence. In other parts of the Northeast, the state is very present, whether it's through the state government, through the armed forces, or whatever it is. But in some critical areas like health delivery, these islands of the Brahmaputra, the state is virtually absent. So it is basically groups which are working at the civil society level which reach out to other people and so on. So I think it's very important to understand that as far as this region is concerned, no one state is like the other and no one district is like the other, because many of the districts also reflect a certain ethnic composition.
Right.
In some places they don't. I always say the Northeast is a region of many minorities or many large minorities, without any great majorities. Like, for instance, you take the Boro areas. The Boro districts are ruled by the Boro parties, but the Boros are only 28% of the population. So 72% are non-Boros. Now, this makes for a very difficult mix and match situation where the voices of the majority are not reflected in the elected mandate, and the elected mandate then has control both over politics, economics, and virtually of law and order also.
Since the time of independence or since the formation of Indian Union, this whole area, this whole region was quite volatile, and as you have said that there were many insurgent groups to whom Government of India had some accords. There are a number of accords from Assam Accord, Mizo Accord, Nagaland Accord. So after all these 67 years, do you think there is a sense of belonging to India, and there is a sense of what you call it national integration?
I think that the people of Northeast are voting with their feet. People are talking about look east policy, but the people of the Northeast are looking west towards other parts of India. The Northeast is becoming a large migrant producing area for the first time in the history of the region, which has received migrations from all over Asia and the world. It's becoming a net migrant producing area because of people are going out to Delhi, to Bangalore, to Goa, to Karnataka, Punjab in search of jobs, in search of a good education, in search of livelihoods. I think that is very important. That's one thing. The second, so in that is an answer to your question. People whose parents perhaps fought against, physically may have fought, or mentally may have engaged the idea of India, today they are engaging with that in a different way by saying, we have a right to be here.
Yes.
We are also here. I said during one of the events at the conference that Delhi is the 9th state of the Northeast, because people are coming in such large numbers. So they're investing the time, the energy, and their money in this place. So that's one part of it. So
you mean to say they are getting Indianized by coming to the other part of the country?
No,
or is it compulsory?
I don't basically either like the word Indianized or mainstream, because nobody knows what the Mukhya Dhara is. The Mukhya Dhara, I would say, is the Brahmaputra, which has more water than all the rivers of India together. But that's a different thing. I think that people are being much more practical in their approaches to life, and they're making choices, informed choices, because now there is information technology. You can connect to different parts of the world, to different parts of India. Somebody goes there, says, okay, here's an opportunity, come along. So most people come along. Some people go back. Now, that's one thing. The second thing is, as far as what you're talking about in terms of the conflict resolution, like all these accords and all that. Mizoram is the only one that has really worked, because there was involvement of civil society, of the church, which is very influential in Mizoram, and of the political groups on both sides. It wasn't just the insurgents, but also the state government was involved. In many cases of the settlements, it's the central government dealing with an insurgent group. The state government is nowhere in the picture. So that means there's a gap in understanding between the state government, the center, and the insurgent groups. I think that what has also happened in places like Assam, Nagaland, and so on, is that the levels of violence between the state, which means like the government of India's forces, security forces, army, paramilitary, and so on, and the armed groups has actually fallen because there are so many ceasefire agreements, if not peace accords. But the level of violence by these armed groups, I won't call them insurgencies because I don't think they're insurgency anymore. That dream of greater separation, all that has gone.
What you call Ulfa in Assam?
Ulfa is an important armed group. It argues, there's a particular construct that argues. But all of us, the major portion of Ulfa is in negotiations with the center. They have given up arms. Another former representative of Ulfa is a member of parliament now. So there's one group, a smaller group, which is based in Burma and maybe in Bhutan. But the problem with all these accords is these are manufactured consent. These are stopgap arrangements apart from Mizoram, and they are settlements with small groups of people who may not be truly representative. They may have been at one point, but who may not be truly representative of the people they claim to represent. So unless there is that greater involvement of communities and of senior civil society leaders, even media and scholars particularly, why is it that the government of India comes to these settlements without any thorough research? Its research is based on its files. Now, government files are not the best place to look for information. You may get intelligence information. You may not get true information of what people are thinking.
But you think that the integration process is going on there?
What you would call integration, I would call it engagement.
Okay.
And I think
engagement is going on.
Well, engagement continues. The very fact that violence has come down, so many young people you see in Delhi and the metros across India they're professional, they're teaching, they're working, they're doing different kinds of livelihoods. Some are in the service industry, some are in the hotel industry, So it's across the board. And the next generation will take it, move the bar a bit further. It's like pushing a glass ceiling, We must constantly push.
So I mean to say whether it is going for the good or the bad or what?
Well, sometimes if you read the newspapers, you think that horrible things are happening, which they are. Tragedies take place, people are massacred. But then you look at the other side, which is that there are many good things also happening. Many innovations are taking place. Some of the most important, I think, social innovations and approaches, outreach in health, education, so on, are taking place in that region.
Okay. Most of the northeastern states are surrounded by international border. China, Burma, Bangladesh, Myanmar. Very few states are connected directly to India, the mainland.
See, before independence, the Northeast was not landlocked. It was part of a larger process of dialogue, trade, culture, and so on. Suddenly, one person came and drew the lines, and you're shaped almost like a triangle with a narrow link to the rest of India. 96% of our borders is, as you said, with other countries. Yes. So that has created, I think, a psychological distance and political and economic distance, So these three distances have to be overcome by bridge building. And physical bridge building, in terms of roads and railways, is not the way. You have to have initiatives, and the government has taken plenty of initiatives, the Northeastern Council, the Ministry of Donor, but these are attempts by governments. And I think what we need is larger efforts by civil society, by scholars and all that, to bring this into a greater discourse, And I think that's very important. That's been one of the efforts behind the conference that we had, which is to place this in a larger setting, because the larger setting can place the Northeast at the center of the universe.
And what's your opinion about the policymakers here in Delhi towards Northeast, and the politician, the media and the civil society? Are they doing justice with Northeastern state, or do you have some complaints about it?
No, I don't complain. I think that everybody has a lot to learn, especially the media. Because media, unless it understands that like incidents which take place in the Northeast are not like what happens near Delhi or in Uttar Pradesh and so on. Some clashes are painted as communal, where it's basically a group of armed men who go and shoot up a village. That's not a communal clash, it's an attack by an armed gang. So, and in terms of the government's perception, governments change policies. I don't know if perceptions really change. So I'm looking forward to see how this new government, which is going to be a year old in May, how it's actually changing or attempting to change the discourse towards the region. I mean, the Look East policy or the Act East policy is all very well, but what is going to happen in terms of action on the ground? What is going to happen in terms of linkages to our neighbors? How do you improve relations with Bangladesh? Because that and Myanmar are our biggest neighbors apart from China, with whom there's a dispute. So these are the things that I think are critical to the region in terms of connectivity, both cultures as well as trade and developing a better understanding of itself.
Some people were saying that there are regional imbalances and regional disparities, and northeastern states were not given what it was their due. So do you think there is a change in that policy?
I think it's a bit early to say. I mean, I'd like to see how things really develop. There may be a policy shift, I think, in the next months, but we'd like to see what it actually is before pronouncing any judgment on it. I mean, up to now, I have seen a lot of good things that have been said, but I'm trying to see what is going to be functional on the ground.
Professor Sanjoy Hazarika, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So this was Professor Sanjoy Hazarika, Director, Northeast Studies and Policy Research in Jamia Millia, Islamia, New Delhi.